Tuesday, May 14th, 2019, Tuesday of the fourth week of Easter, but today we celebrate the solemnity of St. Matthias, the apostle chosen to replace Judas. Anytime we celebrate one of the apostles, I kind of get a little excited because these are the ones who stood strong in the face of persecution, and that's why we're here today. Father Benedict starting his day with a cup of coffee.
Yes.
So after reflecting on Our Lady of Fatima yesterday, I also thought it might be appropriate today to just give a little reflection on what's happening now with Medjugorje. As you may not have heard, on Sunday, a statement was released by the Pope that there is now permission to organize pilgrimages to Medjugorje. Many times when it comes to Medjugorje, I find there's a lot of misinformation as well as good information, and sorting between the two has always been a bit difficult, especially for the faithful. When they redid the new lectionary that we have since really the late 90s, one of the errors that were in it is that they listed St. Matthias as May 13th. It is May 14th, and maybe it's high time I corrected it in the book. So when I say misinformation with regard to Medjugorje, I've found over the years that there are people who will say things about Medjugorje that aren't founded on fact, but on their personal desire for it to be true. So let me preface all of my remarks on Medjugorje by first saying, yes, I have been there. I have been there many a time. Yes, I do have family that lives in and around Medjugorje. So yes, I do have some sort of a personal connection to Medjugorje. And yes, over the years, have I had any doubts that Our Lady has appeared to these young people, now adults? No, I haven't really, because of what's happening there. If you've ever been there or you go there, you're going to see things that you don't see anywhere else in the world. When I first went to Medjugorje, it was 1986. And in 1986, there were no hotels, there was no air conditioning in the church. The communists were still oppressing the whole thing that was going on. Trust me when I say it's very different than the Medjugorje that someone would experience today. When I did go that time, there was no option. I stayed with my relatives, which I loved doing. I got to experience this simple, humble peasant life of people who were oppressed by communists. My cousins did show us some very gracious hospitality, even allowing us to sleep in their beds and taking beds in the old house so that we could be comfortable. And pretty much every year since then, sometimes a couple of times in a year, I've gone back to visit my family, but also to pray in Medjugorje. So right about this point, I'm guessing in your head, you're wondering, am I a priest because of Our Lady of Medjugorje? And the answer is yes. Have there been those who would deny that Medjugorje is real? Of course. I had a conversation with someone, it was probably about 15 years ago now, who was completely opposed to Medjugorje. My first question is, have you ever been there? So I will say the arguments that he presented against Medjugorje were pretty cogent, pretty good arguments, but what I would like to call superficial, because all they talked about were things that an outsider can see, but if you were ever been there, you would see that, well, these just only scratch the surface. So among the first things that a superficial argument would be is that Medjugorje has changed the amount of money and the lifestyle of all the people who are living there. I have to admit that is true. However, it's also true in Fatima, it's also true in Lourdes, it's also true in any place where hundreds of thousands of people gather. If we go by the criteria of people making money at these apparition places, well then we're going to pretty much have to shut down any place of pilgrimage that exists. Of course, another argument is the amount of time, the years and years that this has been going on. I'll address that in a few minutes when I talk about the commission that was set up to study Medjugorje. But suffice it to say that in my immediate reply to this individual, I did say that is unusual, but in the realm of God, anything is possible. Another regular argument I hear is that none of the visionaries had a religious vocation, which is true, but the number of priests and religious that have become such because of Medjugorje is uncounted. I couldn't even tell you how many. But in the end, I think his argument went towards deception of the devil. Okay, this is the one that kind of really gets me. If you've never been to Medjugorje, then you don't see the spiritual fruits. Anyone who ever goes to Medjugorje, anyone who spends even a couple of days there, are going to be asked to do certain things. They're going to be asked to pray a rosary, a lot of times while climbing a very difficult mountain, doing the Stations of the Cross, going to Mass, going to confession, going to adoration. Well, there are some sidebar things that people do. They'll go visit Chinakalo, where there is a drug rehabilitation center that started. They will go to visit Mother's Village, which formed after the war to take care of orphans. And so I said to my friend who was kind of pushing this whole deception of the devil thing, I said, if the devil's playbook is to get people to do the Stations of the Cross on a very difficult mountain to climb, pray the rosary, go to confession, go to Mass, go to adoration, that's a pretty bad playbook. So I think we can rule out a deception of the devil. I really can't believe that the devil would want what's happening in Medjugorje to happen. Today is a Tuesday, and on Tuesdays here at Blessed Sacrament, we have our devotions to St. Anthony, and we have extended adoration in the afternoon. Know that you'll be in my prayers, especially as I invoke St. Anthony and when I kneel before the Blessed Sacrament. So now it's just a few minutes before 9 a.m. I'm about to go out and say the morning Mass. I will keep you and your family in my prayers and intentions. God bless you. So now getting back to the revelations that came out this weekend when Pope Francis did allow pilgrimages to Medjugorje. This actually dates back quite some time. A commission was set up about 8 or 9 years ago by Pope Benedict, and that commission had concluded and sent a report to Rome. The Pope has received that report. He's been sitting on it now for a couple of years. He did make a comment initially about Our Lady being a daily messenger, bringing these little messages all the time. That could be a concern for some, but I don't think that that would be enough for us to say that there's a problem. Basically, what the report did conclude, what the commission did conclude, is that there is something miraculous. They affirmed that the first 7 days, certainly there was something happening, and they affirmed that as being miraculous and mystical, and the rest of it is left open for investigation. Now, when anyone had asked me about the commission, I said there's one of 3 possible outcomes that they're going to come to. The first one is absolutely positively Our Lady is appearing in Medjugorje. Highly unlikely. The second one was absolutely not. Our Lady has never appeared there. The whole thing is a hoax. I would have real problems with that. Or the third possibility is, well, there's something, but we're not sure what, and therefore we're going to have to wait and continue investigating. And that's pretty much what the commission concluded. So now I'm guessing, based on the findings from this commission, what Pope Francis is saying is, all right, there was something in the beginning. There's probably something still today. You know what? Go ahead, and if you're going to go there to do what people have been doing, praying, confessing, adoring, well, then go. But what the Pope has not done is given approval. See, people will mistake his statement as a statement of affirmation. He did not affirm Medjugorje in that regard. He did not give the seal of approval. All he is saying is that what's happening there bears fruit. Therefore, if people want to go in an organized fashion, go. As a matter of fact, he never even made reference to the report or to the first 7 days. All he is saying is that, yes, it is now permissible for a priest to take a group there, which really hasn't changed very much. It just previously I couldn't take a group officially. I would just accompany a group because they needed spiritual direction. All right, so when it comes to Medjugorje, and anybody ever asks me, what I think about Medjugorje, I think with the church. While I have a personal opinion and I have had experiences that lead me to believe something mystical is going on there and Our Lady is blessing the place, I still defer to the church and her authority because they're far wiser than I and they would have more insight into what's really happening than I could ever have. And I pretty much could say that the same would be true about anything related to that which is outside the deposit of faith. Anything outside the deposit of faith has to rest with the church authorities. To do any investigation and to do any looking into these things rests with them. So in the end, if we're good and faithful Catholics, we do have to accept the judgment, the final judgment of the church on a place like Medjugorje. Now, we do have to admit, of all the champions of Medjugorje that have been over the years, now St. John Paul II, when he was alive, was a fan of Medjugorje. He made that kind of clear several times when he made statements about Medjugorje. And even though St. John Paul II was in favor of Medjugorje, it doesn't mean that it was given any approval whatsoever. He was speaking as a private individual about something private. He wasn't speaking for the Universal Church. So in just a few short weeks, Medjugorje is going to celebrate its 38th anniversary. On June 25th, 1981, the 6 children that would become the visionaries of Medjugorje, the alleged visionaries, I have to be careful, the visionaries of Medjugorje, they became the 6 that even to this day are still associated with those first 7 days and the nearly 38 years since. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, the spiritual fruits of Medjugorje are many. The number of vocations, people just privately being renewed in the faith, having a huge reversion, coming back to the Catholic Church. I can't even begin to list the number of interesting things to note. I never realized, but Jim Caviezel had said to us while in the Holy Land that his decision to be Christ in the Passion of the Christ happened while he was in Medjugorje. And just as an aside to this entire conversation, people ask me about my relationship with 206 Tours, and it really centers on the president and CEO, Milanka. Milanka founded 206 Tours as a pilgrimage company originally to help pilgrims get to and from Medjugorje. If you go and look at their website, tour number 1 is a pilgrimage to Medjugorje. Now in 1987, there were 2 reporters, Jim Bailey and Mary Lou McCall, who had went to Medjugorje to try to debunk Medjugorje. They went there to prove that it was all a hoax. And they came back on fire. They came back converted and spread the message. And that's why, especially in the late 80s, 88, 89, and 90, Americans were going in huge numbers. But as anyone knows, in 1991, the Civil War began in Croatia and then eventually into Bosnia and Herzegovina. And that pretty much stopped all of the Americans. And since that time, it's never really rebounded. We've never seen huge numbers of Americans heading to Medjugorje anymore. I am actually fascinated now about the number of people who know nothing about Medjugorje in the United States. In the late 80s, everybody knew.